A good Sabbath morning to you all. This is Bill Bullock, and once again I'm coming to you live from the Biblical Lifestyle Center in Texarkana, USA. This is our second installment in the 5786 series of Torah studies called Returning to and Laying Hold of the Tree of Life. That's our quest, that's our journey this year, is to return to, lay hold of the Tree of Life. And we're referring to the Tree of Life as the ultimate book of wisdom and divine instruction for life on planet Earth. That is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. We are beginning at the beginning. We are in the book of Genesis, the first book. And we are at Parsha Noach, the second subdivision of the Torah. Parsha Noach is, or Noah as it's called in the Western world, is found at Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, through chapter 11, verse 32. We have a series of stories, of parables presented to us in this parsha, in this particular section of the book. We're focusing heavily on stories and parables right now as we get ready to get into the meat of the story, the meat of the book, the meat of the divine instruction manual. And so these stories, this time will be about an existential threat to the ecosystem and how the creator of the universe decides to handle that, and how he shows the worst possible scenario from the standpoint of mankind as a species, with a great flood, bringing a great flood. And then he teaches us gradually how he's going to change that methodology and refine and hone in on what really needs to happen. And it's going to be a shocking, amazing story that he's going to tell us what he's going to do instead of bring a flood in every time the earth faces an existential threat. So, Parsha Noach, our studies in Parsha Noach are entitled Facing the Ultimate Existential Threat. It's part of returning to and laying hold of the Tree of Life. Noach is about the strategies and methodologies that the Creator wants to demonstrate and teach us with how to deal with existential threats. Existential threats that threaten the actual continued existence of humanity as a species and of the ecosystem of Earth as a habitat for humanity and for other species of the Earth. It's made. So before we get too deep into our studies, let's do what we normally do: awaken our spirits, our neshama within us, get our hearts wide open and our eyes open too, and listen to the heartbeat of the King from heaven as we sing the Shema. Join with me if you would. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto, Leolam Vayed. Amen. Now listen and hear and heed and pay attention and respond and resonate, O Israel, because the Holy One is our God, and He is the ultimate unity, the unifying oneness, the ultimate unifying unity that draws all things unto Him in His gravitational pull. Blessed be He, and blessed be His glorious attributes and the name by which He's called forever and ever, and bless His kingdom forever as well. Well, we take the name for our study series this year, of our journey this year, of returning to and laying hold of the Tree of Life, from Proverbs 3:18. In Proverbs 3:18, the wise man of Israel, Shlomo, king, the wisest man ever lived on earth, said, she, in referring to the higher wisdom of the Torah, she, the higher wisdom of the Torah, is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her, and happy, moving straight toward the target, full in all the things is he who acquires and possesses her. So from that proverb, we are engaging in this quest to find, to return to, and to lay hold of the Tree of Life, this book of wisdom. So what is life? We talked a little bit about this last week. Just summarizing it, is that life in Hebrew is chahaim. The tree of life is etz chahaim. And it's actually a plural superlative form. Haim is a plural superlative form of the Hebrew noun chai. It comes from a verb which means to thrive, to prosper, to live with sustainable vigor, and to live according to designed potential and fill out that potential, and thus to fire on all cylinders. That's the level and the kind of life that we're looking for, a tree that will grow at that life, and we can nurture ourselves from that life. Happy are those who lay hold of her, acquire her, and possess her. High quality life is a high, beautiful level of life, a level at multiple levels where we have the consonance and the resonance of the flesh and the mind and the will and the emotions and the spirit, the basar, the nefesh, and the neshama, all flowing together in perfect unity, mirroring the creator of the universe in heaven. That's high quality life. That kind of life, beloved, does not just happen. It doesn't just come willy-nilly. It's not a product of serendipity. It doesn't just get bestowed on you immediately. High quality life doesn't just happen, nor is it even common experience for mankind in today's world. But though it is rarely seen in your experience or mine, high quality life is very, very real. And it is intended for all and available for all who will seek the higher wisdom and walk in the more excellent ways of the infinitely wise Creator, and follow as He leads us back to and returns us to and invites us to lay hold of this tree of life. How can mere mortals, you ask, how can mere human beings like us with a temporary lifespans, how can we acclimate to the higher wisdom? How can we begin to walk methodically in the more excellent ways of the Creator? Well, beloved, we have to let Him become our rabbi, our teacher. And we have to surrender a part of our lives to become faithful disciples, and Talmudim as they're called in Hebrew. We must walk with the Creator daily. We must meditate on Him all the time and watch Him work as He goes through His world. As we stay with Him, He's not with us, following us around. We're following Him around, watching Him work. We watch Him work, and we learn from the way He does things. We observe His techniques, His brushstrokes of genius. We observe His responses to trials. And like in this week, we see and we'll watch His response to existential threats to mankind, existential threats to the ecosystem, which we'll be facing in Genesis chapter 6. We watch Him do these things, and we begin to listen for His words. When He speaks, we tune our ears to it, and we stop what we're doing and let it penetrate our minds. We hang on and meditate day and night on everything that He says, every utterance of His mouth. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of the Holy One. We begin to take that seriously. And we listen to care, especially for three things. First of all, His deployment assignments, His general declaration of what we're supposed to do, what our purpose on earth is, our deployment assignments. Those are somewhat general, but we'll see that we get more specific. The second item that He tells us and we're listening for when He speaks is specific instructions about how to live life in the deployment and under the assignment we're at. And these are in Hebrew called mitzvot, or commandments they're called in English, or hukot, or ordinances, or statutes as they're called in English. Who doesn't understand this Hebrew mindset that a wise rabbi is teaching us how to live life well. So He gives us both deployment assignments in general and specific instructions within those assignments. And then the third thing He gives us is something we focus a lot on in the book of Genesis, and that is wisdom-infused parables. In Hebrew they're called mashalim, and they are wisdom-infused parables, stories told by the Master, designed to awaken wisdom within us after He's deposited it through deployment assignments and specific instruction. So, let's talk about the first level of downloads, of revelation of His words that we receive and we listen for as we are returning to and laying hold of the tree of life. The first one is deployment assignments. In Hebrew, mishmeret, the charge or the placement in the world with a mission. So the first thing we learned about in last week's Parsha, in Parsha Bereshit, the opening Parsha of Torah, was that we actually are here on assignment. Human beings are not here just to live life and do the best they can and hopefully do well. We're here on an assignment. And that assignment is specified as the way in which we were introduced to mankind in the first place. And the Holy One spoke, Elohim spoke, and he said, let us create man. In English, we say in our own image, after our likeness. But then Hebrew, it's a couple of phrases. Betzelmenu, as our earthly shadow. To be a shadow upon earth of our movements in the heaven, of our behaviors, the Holy One is speaking here in a superlative, plural form. He is the ultimate superlative, Elohim. And so this is how he speaks. And he says, the first mission of man, first deployment of man is to come to earth and be a shadow. In other words, move when I move. Do what I do. Go at the pace I go at. Go for the purposes I go for. They become my shadow upon the earth. And the second thing, as we said, it's not just in the image of the Holy One, but that's Sel, that's Selena, but also according to his likeness. And that Hebrew phrase is, and was given to us as kidmitenu. Kidmitenu. It means to imitate. So we're here to imitate the Holy One, the Creator, and the way he does things. We're here to what? To do what he does. To approach things and approach situations and approach people and care about things the way he does. We're to imitate him, become like him. We're to bear his image. We're to become his representation upon the earth, not just his earthly shadow moving when he moves, but actually in everything we do, imitating him, becoming like him, bearing his image to the world. The third aspect, we have multiple aspects of this deployment. The third aspect of this deployment we learned about last year, the mission for which we were here, is Puru Urvu in Hebrew. It means be, in English we translate it usually as be fruitful and multiply and expand in the earth. Be fruitful and don't just be static. Don't get into a status quo. Don't get into a rut. Understand you're here to continually build, and it's an exciting enterprise that you've been engaged in. Puru urvu, be fruitful, bear fruit. And what is the fruit of the kingdom? What is the fruit of the Holy One? I won't list it right here, but you understand what I'm talking about. Bear that fruit and expand your influence and your engagement with the earth and its species. Well, that's the third of the seven of the deployment assignments, the mishmeret that we learned about. We're just getting started. The fourth of the deployment assignments was milu et haaretz, and fill the earth to fullness. Don't leave anything. Don't let there be a frontier unchallenged. Go throughout the world. And spread yourself and disperse yourself through the world, and let your shadowing and let your imitation of the Holy One and your image bearing of the Holy One and your fruitfulness and your multiplication touch and do good things in the earth. The fifth of the seven of the deployment assignments we learned about last week, and I hope you're picking up on this, and this is what you realize you're here for. This is your purpose for being here. And the fifth of the seven is vikushua, bring under authority. King James Version of the English says, subdue all creatures, of all things, subdue, but bring under authority, if you're under the shadow yourself, and you're bearing the likeness, or you're becoming like and bearing the image of the Holy One, then you bring that into every species, and you exhibit that to every species of the earth. The sixth of the seven things that we're here to do in life. We're here to interact with the species again by ridu b'kol haremesh al haaretz. That means in English, we're to take a form of dominion over and work with and bring out the best and the potential in everything that creeps and moves upon the face of the earth. We are not to isolate ourselves. We are to be engaged with the world. We are not to hide away in little closets or little hermit shacks, our little cloisters, or the ivory towered buildings of religion. We are to engage with the world and to bring out the best in everything we touch, to the extent that we can, to leave everything better than we found it. This is why you're here. You learned this last week. And the seventh thing, the seventh deployment assignment, mishpat, that we received last week, and that applies for all time, is that we were to abda uv shomra. the idea is to tend and to keep, it says in English. This is about what happened in the garden, and later it's expanded to the thorn and thistle world outside the garden. Last week, the instructions of the Holy One to mankind were to avda ushbara. And that means to tend and keep, to cherish, to guard, to delight in and take care of and to serve the garden and then the thorn and thistle realm in the greater context. We're servants of the land. We are to cherish it, love it, adore it. We're to like the place we live and be grateful for the opportunity to be here and be mindful of the importance of our mission upon this earth. If the earth is to do well, it's up to us to do well for it. Well, that was just the deployment assignments. Now, when we get to the specific instructions, we only had 2 last week. And really, most people only saw 1, but there were really 2. And the first one was in the context of Adam, first introduction to the garden. And as Adam was being introduced to the garden experience last week, and this purpose of abiding and shamaring the land, there's a garden there. He was told, now eat of all the trees you may eat freely, but of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the tov v'ra, you're not to eat, and if you do, you will have a consequence. You will begin to lose your life force. And you will lose your life force. So he said that that was in Genesis 2:16-17. First instruction, a specific instruction about how to handle your assignment. That's what we learned about mitzvah. We're learning these techniques now because this is the way the Holy One speaks. He gives us an assignment with a mission and an empowerment, and then he gives us specific instructions how to maintain that. That's what we call mitzvah or commandments. So the deeper truth of the do not eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there is a deeper truth. Everything, all these instructions, when you get this far, it involves far more than meets the eyes, far more than is on the surface, far more than the pashat, as the Hebrews would say. There is deeper meaning to all these instructions. And let's take the instruction of do not eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't be controlled by your stomach. It's a bigger truth than this. Understand that the Holy One gives you what you need. He provides everything you need and everything that is good for you and that fulfills His purpose and helps you fulfill your purpose. So don't go looking for things that your stomach says look good or your eyes tell you want. Don't be controlled by your stomach or by any of your fleshly appetites. This is the meaning of the deeper meaning of the instruction. It's still the main thing. When He tells us what to eat or what not to eat, it's not just about that. Although that's a key, that's a window into the opportunity to dig deeper into this. But it is about learning not to be controlled by our stomach and our fleshly appetites. The instructions the Holy One gives to us are first level tests, deeper than they look on the surface. They are always an invitation to transcend, to overcome and to transcend and to reconnect with this power source of heaven, to get back into quantum entanglement or with the Holy One and the kingdom realm of heaven. So they are a first level test of our patience and our energy and our desire to serve the Holy One and walk in His ways and find the tree of life and lay hold of it. And there's secondly an invitation to transcend, to go higher, to go further. They recognize there's this tension as we live upon earth, and human beings should know that Torah makes clear we are under tension at all times. We are getting messages from our appetites and our urges and our hormone-enhanced drives of the flesh and our desires to acquire and desires to own things and desires to control situations and desires to experience stuff and thrills and pleasures and also desires to know stuff, to be intelligent, to be informed, to be educated, more so than our fellows. We are under this pressure, this tension, as these pressures contrast to the desire, the delight we have, that we're programmed to have in doing the will of the Holy One, the Creator, our mentor. Which one wins? The tension and the pressure of the human urges and appetites and the senses of wanting to know stuff, or what wins? The delight to know and to do the will of the Holy One. That was the first instruction or mitzvah that we learned last week. The second instruction we learned last week was Mashal Teshukacha. or teshukah. It's to learn how to use practical wisdom to defeat, to overcome the desires that impel us to the negative side, to the side of abandonment of our mission and our deployment instructions. Mashal teshukah, use practical wisdom. Where does this come from? Come from the mashal, the story of the Holy One speaking with Cain. When Cain was downhearted, his face was, his countenance was lowered. He was angry at his brother or about his brother Hevel. The Holy One came to him, and he said to him that you are to mashal teshukah. You are to overcome the sin crouches at your door, the evil one, the Ra, the darkness of the earth, and the desires to do things that will be harmful. That is crouching at your door, and it desires to own you, but you must use practical wisdom, mashal teshukah, to defeat that which impels you towards the negative, the dark side. So these are the two things we learned about our deployment, these instructions. So the first thing was our deployment placement, and second is our instructions or mitzvot. And the third thing that we've already kind of briefly mentioned is that he teaches us, he speaks to us, and we listen for his voice through wisdom-infused parables, which Hebrew calls mashalim. What is a wisdom-infused parable? Because I know that most people want to look at the Bible, the Torah, linearly from Western viewpoint of intellectual knowledge and sequence and pattern, and it's like you can do that, but that's not going to give you the tree of life. You're not going to get the tree of life that way. To get to the tree of life, you have to realize that this is a set of stories designed by a great rabbi to teach you deep truths that go deeper, take you deeper into his instructions and what the reason for his instructions and the reasons for his deployment strategies. So a wisdom-infused parable is one of the techniques that he uses. Yeshua, the master, will use this as well. He will teach most of his teaching through mashalim. But the Holy One started the process and set the pattern. A wisdom-infused parable, a mashal, is a narrative tale which may or may not be historical. The historicity is not the point, although it may very well be completely historical. But the historicity is not the point. But it's a narrative tale which may or may not be historical, which a rabbi tells a student, a disciple, a talmid, as they call in Hebrew, that is under his tutelage. So it stops the instructions, stops the deployment charge, and now says, I want to tell you a story. And the stories of things like the proliferation of darkness that led to the flood, the story of the flood itself and the ark, and the building of the ark, and the filling of the ark, and the occupancy of the ark, and the travel, the journey of the ark, and all these different things are mashalim that are told, and then the departure from the ark, and the new world order that's designed through the covenant, the covenant that's introduced into the world, and then the vineyard of Noah, the mashal of the vineyard of Noah, and what happened there, the mashal of the building of the city of Enoch and other cities by Cain, and then by Nimrod. And then you see this idea of, instead of spreading out in the earth and doing the protocol of the instruction, which is to touch all the earth and spread it throughout the earth, the mankind decided to build cities and clusters and make their own way. And we see this mashal being developed, and we see the Tower of Babel and the name that they were trying to make for themselves, and reaching up into put their heads into the heavens. And we see these things, these mashalim. Well, these are what the mashalim is. And why does the master, why does the rabbi, why does the teacher, why does the Holy One in this case tell us these stories? Why does he have Moshe tell us his stories? Because he's the writer. Because he wants to broaden our perspective as his disciples, as his who are seeking to lay hold of the tree of life. He wants to increase our understanding, not of knowledge, of information, but of practical wisdom, how to apply the truths and the ways of his patterns in the world and to real situations. He wants to adjust our focus away from things that stir up our fleshly appetites and pseudo-intellectual arrogance, and curiosity, and instead adjust our focus to what's really important and what he really is all about. And he wants to deepen our discernment concerning our particular set and our generation of mission critical challenges that he knows we're going to face. And he knows we need to be able to anticipate as being those who are coming, to be on the watch for at all times, to recognize them as they develop, and to responsibly deal with them in the course of our quest to return and lay hold of the tree of life. He wants us to know how to deal with existential challenges to ourselves, to our species, and to our planet. His way, wisely, not overreacting, not knee-jerk reaction, not, oh my, sky is falling, not doomsday prophecies. He wants us to move according to his wisdom and according to his deployment strategies and instructions. So the sub-theme for Parsha Noach that we will be talking about today is, what do you think would happen to the world? What would happen to the world if people in it quit aspiring to return to and lay hold of the tree of life? What would happen if nobody was aspiring to return to the tree of life and lay hold of it and get its wisdom and walk in its ways? What would happen if nobody was interested and we just did our own things? What would happen if we got distracted from the mission and the calling and the deployment strategies and the instructions of the Holy One, and we got just seduced by whatever was out there, whoever and whatever is out there, and we got indoctrinated by culture and ethnicity and philosophy and religion and science and medicine into humanistic approach to life? We got distracted, we got seduced, we got indoctrinated, or we got deceived and manipulated away from our primary mission, which is to know our Creator and to walk in his higher wisdom and to follow his more excellent ways and bear his more excellent fruit, which is love, which is joy. This is our mission, which is love, which is joy, which is shalom, peace, wholeness, wellness, which is bringing patience and exhibiting patience and goodness and kindness and faithfulness to covenant and gentleness and self-awareness and self-control. Self-denial. These are what we're supposed to. What would happen if nobody even tried? What would happen if there was no aspiration in the human being? What would the world look like? What would humanity behave like? With that being said, as our quest this week, let's sing our call to worship and get our hearts and minds ready. The call to worship is called the Baraku. It is the traditional song sung before reading the Torah. It is a blessing to the Holy One, thanking him for the Torah. Sing with me if you know it. I'll sing it in Hebrew and then I'll carry forward in English. Baruch Adonai Hamvorak. Baruch Adonai Hamvorak Leolam Vayed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Asher bakar banu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Blessed is he who is the source of all blessings. Blessed are you, O Holy One, who is the source of all blessings forever and ever. Blessed are you, O Holy One, King of the universe in this age, who has chosen us from all other peoples of the earth and has given us his Torah. Blessed are you, Holy One, giver of the Torah. Amen. And now may you open our eyes, O Holy One, that we may see the wondrous things you have placed in your Torah. For we are just strangers in the earth, and we need you not to hide your commandments, your instructions for living from us. Well, now it's time, beloved, most beloved of the Most High. It's time. Let us open the book, and in so doing, let us return to and lay hold of the tree of life. Last week in Parsha Bereshit, we learned that our Creator is called by a designation or a functional title, Elohim, plural, superlative form of Adon, of Master or Lord. He is our Creator. He is the Master of the universe. and he is the manager of the ecosystem. And he created two realms of creation. He created the Hashemayim realm, which is invisible, eternal, immortal, incorruptible, and is constantly functioning. And he created, separate from it, but yet connected to it forever, quantum entanglement, Ha'aretz, the Ha'aretz realm, the realm of the earth as we call it, the visible realm, the temporal realm, the constantly in flux realm, and the highly corruptible or redeemable realm. He also created for humankind and for other creation and for other living species 3 levels of Haim, of superlative life. Life superlative in the basar, flesh, and the nefesh, in the mind, and the will, and the emotions, and life that's superlative coming from the neshama, the eternal God-breathed spirit within us. These 3 levels of Haim are to be our goal, and that we could have life abundantly in all these levels. The 4th thing he led us out in last week was the Shabbat. He introduced us to the Shabbat, the Sabbath, this holiness infused interval in time that gives us something to be refreshed by and renewed by every 7 days, every 6 days. Then he gave us the picture, he gave us a foretaste, and let us enjoy a few moments in the Garden of Eden, the place that he has designed. And he introduced us there to the law of sowing and reaping that will apply. Now, the law of sowing and reaping has an exception, and that's the law we'll learn about this week, the law of grace and mercy that he gives to his covenant partners, particularly beginning with Noah. And so we have the next thing he taught us last week was about his deployment and his mitzvot and his mishpatim. And we've talked, and his marshaling. We've talked a little about that today. He introduced us then to the 2 power generating plants, the things that can bring energy into the world. And one was the tree of life, and that's what we're seeking to find, to return to, and lay hold of. But the other one was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. These trees were not just trees, they were sources of energy, light and darkness, good and evil. And then he introduced us to the fact that he is not the only voice that will ever speak to us. The serpent will speak. The serpent's voice spoke. And what is not who it is not his identity, it's what he does. And it's who it's not. He is not the Holy One. And we need to learn to recognize the difference between the voice of the Holy One and the voice of the serpent. Or as he's internalized now after the fall, the voice of the Yetzer Ra. The next thing he did last week is begin to come to the conclusion of the parsha last week was he introduced us to Cain, as he's called in English, Hevel, or Abel as he's called in English, and Shet, the 3 sons of Adam and Hava, and their progeny on the earth. And he introduced us to the very end of the parsha last week to a man who was called Noach. That's the subject of our story this week, the beginning at least of our marshaling this week. Noach, a man in whom was there hope. There was a hope of redemption. So, where we left off last week was that Adam and Hava, after they mated, they devolved into 2 bloodlines. They would have done 3, but of course Hevel was killed. So we had 2 bloodlines left: the lineage, the bloodline of Cain, and the lineage of Shet, or as he's called in the Western world, Seth, the youngest of the 3 children. Now we have this Cain's bloodline. It's characterized by self-obsession. This is where we start the parsha this week. Cain's bloodline is out there, and it's characterized by self-obsession and offense and rage and violence and vengeance toward fellow men. This is the essence of what they live for. They're energized by this darkness, the tree of the darkness. And the self-obsession is rampant. Offense is just their normal course of operation. They love to be offended. They look for things to be offended about. And when they get offended, they rage. They cave into outrage, and they express themselves with physical words, with words, and also with physicality and violence and vengeance toward fellow men. And they are unwilling. The second thing we learned about them is they're unwilling to respond to overtures of peace, overtures of healing, overtures of return to the tree of life. That's what happened with Cain. Cain himself was that way. He would not respond to the Holy One's overtures of shalom. And so we learned that those who are having the way, are living the way of Cain, are unwilling to respond to any overture of peace, either by the Holy One, from the Holy One, calling an invitation back to the tree of life, or from other human beings desiring to make a restitution or a reparation. So we have the way of Cain, and Jude in the Brit Hadashah there is a few verses here that talk about the way of Cain, so that we'll understand and recognize this existential threat when we see it. When people begin to do this, and this is their normal way of life, we have to understand they present an existential threat to humanity and to the ecosystem. Take a deep breath. It's true. You'll know it's true when you see it. So the issue is, what does the book of Jude say about the people who follow the way of Cain? It says, they speak evil of those things they do not even know. What they do know naturally is brute beasts. In those things they corrupt themselves. You see, speak evil, corrupt themselves. They are grumblers. They are complainers. They walk according to their own lusts and appetites. They speak out of their mouths. They speak great swelling words, high-sounding rhetoric. They flatter people to gain advantage, but they're mockers. They are sensual. They cause division because they don't have a functioning, thriving neshama. They've pressed that down. They have no spirit. This is the way of Cain. And the way of Cain involves a toxic threefold cord that fuels them. The first cord, or the first thread of that cord is Ra, the Hebrew word Ra. It's translated in English a couple times as evil, sometimes as wickedness. The idea of Ra, though, is not moral. It doesn't have a moral base. Ra is this idea of self-obsession and failure to recognize or respect the rights and the sovereignty of the Holy One and His mission, calling, His instructions, or His mashalim. Not to take any wisdom from that. Ra is to divorce yourself from the Holy One and show it by virtue of your insurrectionist behavior and your whole self-will. The second of the three cords or strands of the threefold cord that make up the way of Cain and present an existential threat to the world is shachat in Hebrew. It's usually translated in English as corrupt or corruption. The idea of corruption, to ruin, to lay waste, to deviate from the path, to deviate from the excellent way, to deviate from the instructions. Deviate, shakat, corrupt. To admix, to bring in mixtures of things that don't belong, to mix things that don't belong together, to disturb the order of the creation that the Holy One has designed in His wisdom to make it perpetuate and continue to regenerate. And the third of the threefold cords, the third strand, after Ra and Shakat, which is evil or wickedness, and then corruption, the third strand is Hamas. Yes, you've heard it recently. This is one of the parties in the Middle East. It's operative, Hamas. And Hamas means directly violence or cruelty, any selfish form of wanting to take from other people and impose their will and rights and ways upon other people through either force, deception, manipulation, or any form of control. Hamas. So when you see Ra, Shakat, and Hamas together, you should know what's going to happen. You're going to see an existential threat begin to build in the earth. Spoiler alert. Torah, the Creator's instruction manual for life on earth, is specifically designed to train us to recognize and disarm and neutralize these very three destructive influences, Ra, Shakat, and Hamas. To see them and recognize them as they begin to appear in seed form, at least in our lives, in our conversations, in our relationships, in our households, in our bloodlines, in our families, in our communities, in our generations, and ultimately in the world. We are to be on the lookout at all times for Ra, Shakat, and Hamas, and know how to deal with them, how to deal with the existential crisis, how to avoid it if at all possible, and how to deal with it if not. Now, I talked to you about the bloodline of Cain. But I told you there were two bloodlines that were still extant in the earth at the time of the days of Noah. The second bloodline, of course, was the bloodline of Adam and Chava's third son, Shet, or Seth, as he's called in the Western world. Shet's bloodline contains a minuscule percentage of something that gives us hope. Men who reject the way of Cain in favor of the way of the Holy One. Men who call upon the name of the eternal Holy One, the blessed Creator, and are therefore blessed by a relationship with him to have long life, and then to the extent they walk with the Holy One to find Hayah, the fullness of life. And that brings us now to our story this week. That brings us to the 10th generation from Adam and Hava, and the birth of a man from the line of Shet, whose name was Noach. We talked about it last week for the few seconds. The name Noach was taken from the Hebrew sorish, or root verb, nuach, which means to bring to rest, to cause things to settle down. When Noach's birth came, the stage was set for the next divine visitation, the generation of the visitation that would intervene to stop a cataclysm that would be an existential threat to the ecosystem and to mankind, and to reveal also the next phase of the divine plan of redemption, the introduction to earth of something that won't be a flood, not in a watery sense. It will flood the world with something else. It will flood the world with truth and light and life and hope. What are we talking about that's going to create this flood, that's going to be the better plan than the flood? The introduction to the earth of the covenant of Noach, and the covenant of Avram to follow, and the covenant of Israel to follow that, and the Rit Hadashah to follow that. The introduction of heaven, earth meeting together, joining together, aligning together, and entering into covenant relationship and family-focused, kingdom-focused covenantal lifestyle. So the stage is set. Last week, Genesis 6:1 and following said this about that. Now it came to pass, as we hear the mashal, the wisdom-inspired story. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, saw the daughters of men, and they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all they chose. And then the Holy One said, My spirit will not strive with man forever, for he is mere flesh. His allotted days will be another 120 years. And there were Nephilim, fallen ones on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of Elohim came into the daughters of Adam, they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, the men of great renown. But the Holy One saw that the Ra, now remember I told you about this is one of the threefold cords, the Ra of man was great and expanding in the earth, and that every yetzer, every inclination of the contemplations and thoughts of his heart was only Ra continually. Do you see how we're building an existential threat? And the Holy One sees it and understands it and has a plan. The story, the mashal goes on. And then the Holy One sighed. And the fact that he made man on the earth caused him to breathe deeply in his heart. And the Holy One said, I will blot out man, whom I've created from the face of the earth. Both man and beast. This is the way he plans now. This is the harshest way possible, and yet within reason, is to blot out man from the face of the earth. Both man and beast, he says, creeping things and birds of the air. The fact that I made them, though, nachams me, consoles and comforts me. V'noach matzachen ve'enei Adonai. Now we have this shocking statement. So Noach found grace, chen in Hebrew, favor in the eyes of the Holy One. What a shock. He just said, I will blot out man and beast. And now he says, but there's another way. I will make grace, find grace. So introducing Noah, the first man, the prototypical man, to embrace grace and favor from a covenant responsibility standpoint. The words that begin the parsha are Ele Toldot Noach. This is the epic, transgenerationally impactful story of Noach. This is the mashal that flows from Noach, the wisdom-infused parable. So look for your deployment assignments in this story. Look for specific instructions or mitzvot in this story, and look for the greater life lesson that the mashal is trying to teach us. What is the deeper life lesson of the story of Noach and the ark and the flood and the covenant and the vineyard and the tower and the city and the dispersion and the raging nations being sent out into the land? Well, this is the first of the existential threat to mankind. And understand this as we begin. You are Noah. Every human being's life is like Noach's. We are products of not only the creation, the hand of creation of the Holy One, His divine artwork, His magnificent maestro work. We're not just His handicraft. We're also products of our generations, our environments, and our cultures. We are shaped not just by the loving, wise hand of our Creator. We're also shaped in part by forces outside ourselves. So it was with Noah, so it is, and the people of his day, and so it is with us. We're shaped by forces of darkness as much as we're shaped by forces of light, or we can be, even sometimes more so. We are constantly engaged in an enterprise of reshaping the toldot, the life-altering story of our progeny. And we face this challenge situation by situation, temptation by temptation, opportunity by opportunity, and challenge by challenge. In every moment that we live, like Noah, we are either serving the Creator and furthering His grand plan and doing His will, or we are not, and we are aiding and abetting the dominion of darkness. Which will you choose? Which is your way? And what do you think would be the consequences of each? You see, the real existential threat to humanity as a species and to Earth as an ecosystem, the real existential threat is not man-made weapons of mass destruction, nor is it carbon emissions. The real existential threat is not these things. The Holy One has plans to deal with all those things, and He also has a plan to deal with this. But the real existential threat to humanity and to the ecosystem of Earth is something far more sinister than weapons of mass destruction even, or carbon emissions. The real existential threat is more spiritually discerned than physically discerned, and it's more hidden, but yet more real. The real existential threat is the unmitigated proliferation in man and his individual lives and households and relationships and conversations and bloodlines and communities and generations and cultures and ethnicities of Ra, Shakhat, and Hamas, this threefold cord of darkness that threatens the world and its continuation. Ra, Shakhat, and Hamas. What are these three kryptonite-like super toxins that, when they're left to run their course without counterbalance, as per the divine plan, when they do that and don't follow the plan, how do they present an existential threat to the world? How do we recognize them? How are we supposed to learn to recognize Ra and Shakhat and Hamas when we see it in seed form and beyond? And how does the Creator intend for us to neutralize and overcome it? Let's talk first of Ra, evil. I like to use the approach of defining a term by its opposite. It helps you if you know what the opposite is, so you know how to define it. So the polar opposite of Ra is Tov. The polar, King James uses English. The polar opposite of evil or wickedness is goodness, good or goodness, Tov. So what is Tov? The Holy One has defined in the first mashal, the first story of Torah. He told us what good was. And remember when He said it is, and it was good. And He gave us several different definitions of what good was. Good was divine light, or from heaven, from the heavenly energies, illuminating the darkness in the tohu vohu status of earth. That's good when light invades the darkness and illumines the things that are in the darkness. It's good when defined shorelines separate dry land and seawater, where everyone knows where the boundaries are and the borders are. It's good when trees and plants bear fruit, which is their own reproducing seed. And they aren't mingled and they aren't hybridized together. They're allowed to be what the Creator designed them to be. It's good. And it's also good when day and night are defined by the visibility of the sun for the day and the moon for the night. It's good, the Holy One taught us, when species reproduce according to their own kind. It's good when every substance and element and species the Holy One has made on earth, including mankind as a species, is functioning and interacting exactly as he designed them. That's good. That's Tov Meo. It was very good. That's Genesis 1:31. So that is what Tov is, the opposite of those things. When divine light is not eliminating the darkness, but darkness is encroaching upon the light. When the boundaries of the earth are broken, when the boundary lines are moved, when those things are done, we see that when things are not functioning according to their plan, when things are mixed and admixed, those things are not good. Those are Ra. Ra comes from a verb which means to make a loud, noxious noise or racket, to make a clamor that breaks and destroys, like a shattering glass. Thus to stir up drama, to stir up argument, to stir up division and trouble. We find in Proverbs 21:10, the soul of the wicked, the mind, the will, and the emotions of the wicked, of the Rasha, desires this clamorous noise that breaks things and stirs up trouble. The neighbor finds no chen in his eyes. He doesn't see any good in them, doesn't give any favor to his neighbor. Proverbs 3:7 tells us, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Holy One and depart from Ra. Ra means you're wise in your own eyes. You think you know more than your fellow. You think it's all about your knowledge or your information or your privileged status, and that somehow gives you an advantage and a right, entitlement above other people. Do not be wise in your own eyes for the Holy One. Fear the Holy One and depart from evil. And Proverbs 8:13 tells us the fear of the Holy One is to hate Ra, is to choose not to follow Ra. And he defines it as pride and arrogance and the continuum flow of Ra, the way it behaves. And the perverse mouth, those things the Holy One hates. Okay, so that was what Ra is. We should recognize it. Now the second thing we need to recognize and learn is an existential threat when combined with Ra and Hamas is Shachat, corruption. What's it the polar opposite of? The Shabbat Shalom, the fullness of Shalom that comes from prescribed order and prescribed holiness infusions. That's what Shakat is, the opposite of that, because Shabbat Shalom is what the Holy One wants for us. Seder, prescribed order. So, what is the opposite of Shakat? It's Vayomar Elohim, the Holy One speaking and it being done exactly as he speaks. Vayomar Elohim, Vayehi Ken. Several times this phrase is repeated in the opening mashal, Genesis 1:3, and then all the way to 3:30. The second thing that is Shabbat Shalom, that is the fullness of Shalom that comes from order, is Tov Meod, that which is exceedingly good. The third thing is Kala, when things are prepared and made ready per a prescribed plan and blueprint, like happened in Genesis 2:1. The earth was completed, it was kalad in all its vast and awesome array. The fourth thing is Shabbat itself, the self-sustaining, the perpetual, the eternal, a connection between heaven and earth, where heaven actually flows downward into earth, and earth absorbs the wholeness of heaven. And then Barak, the blessing, divine blessing, empowerment to operate and flourish. This is good. This is the fullness of Shalom. This is the opposite of Shakat. Now, if you figure the opposite of blessing, you understand where we're going. The opposite of Shabbat, the opposite of Kala, completeness, the opposite of Tov Meod, the opposite of the Holy One speaking and it being done. And the final thing that Shabbat Shalom is, that the fullness of Shalom is Kedusha, infused energy from heaven flowing to earth and through men. If you take that away, you get Shakat. Okay, so what is corruption in Hebrew? Shakat. It's a destabilizing influence that leads away from the Holy One and his ways and his more excellent path and his instructions for living to destruction and death as a consequence. Now, this is where we see the sowing and reaping protocol. What you sow, you will reap. If you sow into Shalom, you will reap Shalom. If you sow into Shakat, if you sow into corruption, destabilizing influences, you will reap those things manifold. All right. What is the third strand of the threefold cord? It is Hamas. King James Version calls it violence. It could also be called cruelty. The polar opposite of what? The polar opposite of, to define this, to get the polar opposite of it, the opposite is chen, is favor, grace, kindness. What is chen? Well, you see it referenced in the concluding verse of Bereshit, and Noah found chen in the eyes of the Holy One. And as a result of finding hen in the eyes of the Holy One, Noah was seen then as an ish tzaddik, a righteous man. He was perfect in all his generations, and he walked with the Holy One. That's what the essence of hen looks like. So Hamas is the opposite of all those things. So hen involves seeing tov, potential for good, and expecting a good impact from others. Hamas is the opposite. Hamas is not seeing any good potential in anybody but yourself, and not expecting any good potential, maybe even from yourself, but definitely not from anyone else. For refusing chen, refusing grace, refusing favor to anyone else, demanding judgment upon them, demanding vengeance upon them, seeing no good, and therefore judging and condemning and despising and dehumanizing and demonizing, if at all possible, other people, feeling no remorse for treating them cruelly. This is why violence is what it is. Hamas is what it is. Being cruel, harsh, unloving, oppressive, injurious, harm-causing, divisive, ecosystem damaging. Like sugar in a gas tank, this is damaging and destructive to the world. You know people like this. You see it happening in cultures all over the earth. You see it happening, and you know this can't go on forever, especially if it teams up with Ra and Shakat. This is very, very dangerous. Well, welcome then to the timeless stories, the Mashalim of Parsha Noah. We learn about what happened to mankind in creation after Cain murdered Abel. We learn about the cumulative effect over 10 generations of man doing it his way without the Holy One. And we learn what it was like in the days of Noah. The 10th generation of Noah, of Adam and Hava, I should say, the 10th generation of Adam and Hava was Noach, and Noach found grace. And a 6,000-year flood plan was revealed, the only flood like this we will ever see, the flood of all floods, because this is the way we want to, the Holy One wants to show you there's a better way that comes through grace and favor, through the covenant. And the flood narrative is told to us, and the pushing of the restart by the Holy One on creation and mankind, the post-flood narrative, the introduction of covenant terms and blessings and signs is provided to us, and the parable of Noah's vineyard is given to us to show how man begins to operate in the same way of blessing what's blessed and cursing what needs to be cursed. And finally, in the end of Parsha Noach, we find a story of rising humanism, hunters and bricks and brick builders and city builders and tower builders, and then we see the Holy One disperses the peoples, the ethnicities, and the collectives into raging nation separations that will rise and be a counterbalance to one another. And there's one more nation he will yet create. One more nation that will be the subject of the book of Exodus. The one more nation, the holy nation, the Am Segulah, the Mamleket Kohanim, the Goy Kadosh of the Holy One, B'nai Yisrael. So as we introduce the days of Noah, we read that the Holy One saw that the Ra of man was great, and it multiplied throughout the earth, and that every imagination or contemplation, inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only Ra all the time. We see this taking place. Noah, but Noach was Ish Zadik. He was a man who met specifications for the building of a new world. Tamim Haya B'Doratav. He was an example of wholeness and wellness in his generation. But Elohim Hidhalek Noah, and Noah walked and moved in step with what was like the shadow of the Holy One, the Eternal One. V'Yolad Noach Shlosha Banim et Shem et Ham et Yafet. And Noah sired and begat 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Yafet. Well, the plot line is that the earth had been corrupted, shakat, made shakat in the eyes of the Holy One, and been filled with Hamas, violence. You see the correlation here. We had Ra, Shakat, and Hamas. And so the Holy One looked upon and assessed the status of the earth, and behold, he saw it was shakat, it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted itself in its way upon the earth. And the Holy One said to Noah, Ketz kol basar, an end of all flesh is coming before me, for the earth is filled with Hamas, this Hamas through them. Hineni, behold, I am about to shakat them. I'm about to have them give them the fruit of what they have sown. Let them reap what they have sown. They have sown shakat, I will give them shakat. I'm about to shakat them with the earth to the extent they have sown shakat in the ecosystem. So to that extent, they will reap shakat from it. No. What's going to happen, what happened at the flood, the cause of the generation of the flood was not primarily sin. Sin was an offshoot. It was a result. But what was primarily about was the survival of the ecosystem. The Holy One was not judging sin. He was perpetuating the ecosystem of earth and the plan that he voiced whenever he spoke in Genesis 1:1, let us create man. The good news part of the story is the Holy One gave an instruction, a divine instruction as how to function during this deployment. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood, he said. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with kafar, with pitch. And I will establish my brit with you. And you will go upon and within the ark, and you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives, your whole household and family with you. And all of every living thing and every flesh you will bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. And they are to be a male and a female. And the first reference then is to the treating of a treaty. Vayomer Elohim el Noach va'el banav ito lemor. And the Holy One spoke to Noach with his son, saying, Va'ani hineni mechim et briti itekem. I am establishing, putting in place a brit, a covenant with you. This is in Genesis 9:8-9. And with all of your seed that follow you. This is covenant being introduced. This is the alternative. This is the better way than the flood. Instead of flooding the earth with water, he will flood the earth with people in covenant with him to offset and counterbalance the Ra, Shakat, and Hamas. He will do it through Bnei Israel eventually against the raging nations of the earth. He will do it against the humanists. He will do it to counterbalance all the Ra, all the Shakat, all the Hamas-infected peoples of the earth. And we are to learn that our job is to be the opposite of what they are, because we are the original of what the Holy One planned. We need to have self-correction methodologies because we're not always going to be perfect in doing that. We're going to make mistakes. And so we have to have a tune-up series of events, the festivals, the Moedim, and the Shabbat, to be able to reconnect and retune ourselves so we can effectively manage the Ra, Shakat, and Hamas in the world. This is our mission. This is our calling. This is our destiny. This is our purpose upon the earth. Well, beloved, join in this mission. It's your turn. It's your time. With your family, return to and lay hold of the tree of life and be everything you were created to be. Shabbat Shalom. See you next time.